Welcome to Unseen Oddities. Today we're going to be talking about the Roanoke Colony. Not to be confused with Roanoke, Virginia.
Yeah.
This one was actually in what is now North Carolina. It was founded in 1585 by Sir Walter Raleigh with roughly 100 colonists.
So real quick to interject there. So the first colony was in 1585. We'll get to all this explaining it. And Sir Walter Raleigh was technically the founder, but he never even set foot in either of the colonies. But again, we'll get to all that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So they were aimed to be the first permanent English settlement. After landing on Roanoke Island, the colonists ran into trouble with the natives and persuaded their governor John White to travel back to England for food, supplies, and more people.
Yeah, kind of need that stuff.
Yeah, just a little bit. He made it to England, but his return trip was delayed a couple years, and when he was finally able to come back, the colonists were gone with a single word, Croatoan, carved into an outer wall of the settlement.
Pretty ominous.
Yeah. There were no remains, no signs of struggles, and the settlement was mostly dismantled.
Yeah, so a lot of crazy stuff happening there, first off. What do you think happened to him? Before we even get into the history, which we're going to dive pretty deep here, what do you think happened?
I guess, other than, what we talked about in the intro just now, that's pretty much all I really knew about it.
Okay.
I think they just, like most people say, they just kind of moved and then were never found.
Yeah, that's definitely the most compelling. My favorite one, though, is the alien one. And there's no hard evidence. It's just try to disprove it. You can't.
Exactly.
But we'll get into all that. First off, we're going to start with the background of the area. So we're talking about what is now North Carolina, as you said, specifically the Outer Banks.
Yes.
It's a group of barrier islands off the coast of North Carolina. So this area was explored in 1524 by sea. They didn't come from the land and explore it, obviously.
Right.
But it was explored by sea in 1524 by Giovanni de Verrazzano. He thought the barrier islands were actually just like an isthmus, which is it's a small strip of land dividing two bodies of water. He thought the other side of those barrier islands was actually the Pacific Ocean. Oh. Which obviously it wasn't.
No.
There's a whole country to go across.
Yes.
If you're trying to get to the Pacific. But anyways, he came back, told I think the man was Spanish or Italian. I don't know. He came back, told his
probably Italian.
It sounds like it. But told his monarchs about it, whoever the king and or queen of the country he was from, and they never really did anything about it. They were like, oh, that's cool. We'll just keep that tucked away. Nothing ever happened till 1578. Queen Elizabeth I of England, she granted a charter to Sir Humphrey Gilbert.
Okay.
He was basically told anything not claimed by a Christian kingdom is yours for the taking, essentially, in the name of England. Not he,
right, right.
But super vague, right?
Yes.
But it was interpreted at the time to just mean anything north of the Spanish territory of Florida. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Gilbert would meet an unfortunate fate. He'd be lost at sea in 1583.
Okay.
Following that, the charter would be split between his brother, Adrian Gilbert, and his half-brother, Sir Walter Raleigh, as mentioned before. So Raleigh's part of the charter granted him lands south of Newfoundland.
Okay.
Put a little graphic on the screen of where that is, but land south of there, and Gilbert's was anything. Adrian Gilbert was anything Newfoundland and north. right? So this didn't really leave Raleigh with a whole lot of options. It was just the strip between Spanish Florida and Newfoundland, which included Virginia, North Carolina area.
Okay.
Right? The stipulation to his charter was that he had to establish a colony by 1591 or he would not have any rights to colonization.
Okay. So he was on a timeline.
Yep. Even more interesting, he was not allowed to leave. I don't know why. I don't think there were any real records
Like
as
at
to why.
all?
He couldn't leave London. He had to stay kind of by the Queen's side. He had some job there with the royal court or something and couldn't leave, basically. But you can kind of see how that could make it a little difficult to,
So they wanted him to come and explore land, but he wasn't allowed to leave London? Is that what's going on?
They never said he had to explore it. They just said he had to colonize it. So what he did, he delegated all these tasks down to his assistants and associates, and basically was like, hey guys, if y'all want some money, let's go colonize some areas. By the way, I can't leave, but I'll make arrangements for you.
So it was more like, I have this job to do, y'all do the dirty work, and I take all the money, or the claim, fame,
pretty
whatever
much.
you want to call it.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, he couldn't leave, so he just sent friends, and, well, I say friends, but, hired people.
Right.
What have you. So he created basically this expedition to send over there as like an initial, let's check it out, see what's there.
Okay.
And, kind of go from there.
Right.
So this first expedition departed England in April 1584. There were two ships captained by Philip Armadas and Arthur Barlow. Those guys don't really come up later, but, figured we know their names for the sake of this. So they made landfall in July 1584. Y'all doing the math at home. April, May, June, July, right? 4 months, depending on when they leave. So roughly 2 to 4 month trip, depending on what you run into, right? They made landfall just north of Croatoan Island, which is between Croatoan Island and Roanoke Island.
Okay.
Right? We'll have to pull something up on the screen here. Y'all can take a look at it more, figure it out. But Native Americans in the region are thought to have already interacted with previous expeditions in the area. Previous Europeans, not necessarily English, but,
right.
The Spanish and all of that, they were kind of in the area. So it's thought that the natives already knew about Europeans.
Right.
The Secotan, who controlled the region, made contact first. They reached out to this expedition and wanted to be friendly, right?
Okay.
They were. They were friendly with the expedition. The expedition was friendly with them. And so much so actually that when the expedition returned to England later that year, they brought back two natives, Manteo and Wanchese. Don't know. Manteo is the one that is actually relevant in the story, fortunately for us.
Okay.
But, they brought back two natives and spoke very highly of the tribe's hospitality and said, hey, Roanoke Island is a very strategic location. Just keep in mind, at this point, I believe they still think that the Pacific Ocean is not far away. And if that's the case, that's a very good way to get to East Asia. China and
some
all
of the
that.
stuff that I was reading, I'm not quite sure who it said it was, but one of them came over and, like you said, thought it was, what's it called?
Isthmus?
Yeah, Isthmus. He actually thought it was a shortcut to China.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, they wanted to trade with China, India, those places. So
right.
Finding a shortcut to those places instead of having to sail all the way south of Africa or through the Suez Canal. I don't know if that was even around in the 1500s, but
I don't know.
Instead of having to go all the way around, it was a much shorter trip if it were true, but obviously it wasn't. Right. So with that in mind, Roanoke would be a great place to set up a fort of some sort, maybe charge taxes for other countries coming through there,
Right.
Charge them something. it was a good play for them to have some sort of establishment in that area.
Right.
So these guys came back and were like, yeah, this place is aces, man. And Raleigh was granted the land of Virginia, which at the time encompassed the North Carolina, what is now North Carolina, and on into more regions. But for the sake of our story, it did encompass this North Carolina area.
Right.
So he was granted the land, and the title of Knight Lord and Governor of Virginia.
Yes.
It's a pretty cool title.
Yeah.
So, just to catch up on our facts here, Raleigh's the Knight Lord. He can't leave London. The Secatan tribe is friendly at this point. Roanoke is seen as a strategic location. And just keep in mind, Manteo. He does come back later, and I think he plays a very key part in what actually happened.
Okay.
My personal theory.
Okay. We have the first colony.
Yep.
This is not the colony that went missing.
Right.
It's pretty important when it comes to the timeline, so let's talk about it.
Yeah. We'll just go over the highlights here.
Right.
It's a lot of highlights, though.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff happened with the first colony. Mm-hmm. And again, I think all of this is very relevant to figuring out kind of what happened.
Right.
But
okay.
Anyways, take it away.
Consisting of mostly militant force, 600 men, including Mateo, were sent to the Roanoke area. Half of them expected to stay, with more coming at a later point.
Yeah, at this point, I don't think that later point was determined. I think it was kind of like, yeah, y'all kind of get there, we'll get things together, and we'll send them when we can.
Right. A guy named Ralph Lane was appointed governor of the colony.
Yep.
And Philip Amatus was the admiral of the fleet of 7 ships, even though Richard Greenville led the overall mission.
Right. So this Richard Greenville guy, he was in charge of getting there and getting back, basically overseeing, like, we're going to get there, we're going to establish this fort, half of us are going to leave. You know, he was kind of the overseer when it came to that. Yeah. But the Philip Amatus guy, he was the admiral of the fleet. He took care of the sea, the journeys, right, that they had to take.
Okay. The fleet departed in April 1585. They came across some trouble.
Yeah, a lot of trouble.
Including severe weather, losing one ship, rebuilding said ship. One ship ran out of supplies. Another ship dropped off a few men, then diverted north.
Yeah, I think they broke off to do privateering missions, which was pretty much government-sanctioned piracy.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Not really relevant, but it is that they kind of lost the ship to that, so,
yeah.
You know.
Right. Made deals for provisions, only to have the provisions never arrive. A few sea battles with the Spanish. Captured 2 Spanish ships to add to the fleet, and a bunch more.
Yeah, yeah, they ran into a lot of issues, especially with the provisions I was reading.
Right.
The Caribbean was a hot spot, right?
Yeah.
So that a lot of these journeys that we read about here, they would stop off in the Caribbean to resupply, and you know they would be met with mostly the Spanish. For this one, the Spanish were pretty heavily involved in the area.
Yeah, some of the stuff I read, they had it said they actually made a plan before leaving. I'm assuming London. That's where they were leaving from.
Pretty sure.
Okay. When they left London, they had made a plan for everybody to meet in, I think it said Puerto Rico.
Okay.
Is what I read.
Okay. Yeah, somewhere in there. So there was a meeting point. A couple of the ships didn't make it, but made it later. At that meeting point is where they made deals specifically with the Spanish for provisions, and the Spanish just never showed up with them.
Yeah.
So, you know,
right.
It is what it is. What are you going to do about it? It was the 1580s. It was a crazy time. Right?
Yeah. Pirates and all that.
But this next little fact, if you want to read it to us, is actually pretty pivotal in this whole first colony.
Okay. On top of all the issues that they already came into, the flagship also struck a shoal, which caused a big ration of the food and supplies and stuff they had to be, what would you say? Ruined.
Yeah, a bunch of waterlogged bread and stuff.
Yeah.
It's not good anymore. It's going to mold or whatever.
Exactly.
So,
right.
Yeah, a lot of their rations were ruined. Obviously, with that, they weren't able to have the same size colony that they wanted to have. They couldn't leave behind half the men. So they decided they would just leave 100 instead of 300 is what it would have been.
Yes.
Instead of leaving 300, they would only leave 100, and the rest would go back to England.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
They planned a second wave to bring more colonists and supplies. They were planned to set sail from England in June of 1585, but they were diverted to Newfoundland to relay a message about Spanish naval activities.
Yes, that puts them going significantly north of their target, and obviously, we'll kind of keep up with that second wave a little bit, and kind of track them as we go, but it wouldn't be until much later than intended that second wave would arrive.
Yeah.
All right, so all of this kind of bad stuff's going on with their journey.
Right.
They end up hitting the shoal, like you said.
Yeah, losing half their supplies.
Yeah. Not really good.
Right.
They did make it, so they didn't run into too much where they couldn't make it or had to turn around. They made it to Roanoke. They met kind of with the Secretarian. They were friendly for a little bit. Then tensions started to grow. The colonists had to kind of rely on the food supply of the natives a little bit. Like, hey, we don't have all these rations we were supposed to have. Let's get some of y'all's food. And the natives, they were accommodating at first, and then tensions just started to grow. It didn't really help that shortly after they got there, the English actually burned down one of their villages because they thought that they stole a cup.
A cup?
Yeah, I mean, granted, it was a silver cup.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a silver cup. It went missing. The English went back to the village they thought that they lost it at, or thought it might have been stolen from them at, and was like, hey, give us back our cup. And the natives were probably just like, I don't know what y'all are talking about, get out of here.
Right.
And the English were like, yeah, you know what we're talking about, and burned down the village because of it. It didn't really help, but Manteo, as mentioned before, he was a big proponent in smoothing over relations.
Okay.
We'll see a couple times here where Manteo's kind of stepped in and was like, hey, they're not really from here. Let's give them a little grace. They're just trying to get away from England. It's crazy over there. And the natives were cool. This guy's one of us, says we should vouch for them, so let's give him a chance. Basically. Well, morale was also very low with the colonists, on top of tensions rising. So a lot of these colonists, they came because they thought there would be gold and silver, because the Spanish were finding a lot of gold and silver in their expeditions. Yeah. Right? Well, this is a different area than what the Spanish were going to.
They were more like Florida area, right?
Yeah, Florida into like Mexico, South America a little bit. They were much further south than entirely different area.
Right.
So these colonists, expecting all this stuff, they don't ever find it. They don't ever get any gold or silver. They thought at one point that they could find where the natives were getting their copper from. Never found it. A lot of stuff like that just really led to morale being low, like I said.
Right.
So with morale low, tensions high, fighting breaks out between the natives and the colonists. Okay. So a lot of stuff happened here, but it's not really the focus of the video. We're more focusing on the lost colony, so I'll just kind of gloss over it. Essentially, this led to a state where the colonists had the son of one of the chiefs of one of the tribes of the area hostage. Of course, it was kind of a different time. He wasn't like a... It was weird. Battles
It's
back...
interesting. It went from you stole my cup to I got your kiss.
Yeah. Battles and stuff back then were much different. So they were more formal, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So even though like they had this guy, this person hostage, they would still let him have visitors and still interact with them. They weren't actively hostile. It was weird because like out in nature, wherever, if colonists are foraging,
so it was a friendly kidnapping.
Friendly, but
you know what I'm saying.
It wasn't extreme like it would be today. It was very, very formal. But anyways, they used him to leak false information of a fleet of reinforcements coming to make landfall, right? So they had gotten word that, hey, the natives are going to attack. If y'all, just letting y'all know. Okay. And they, the English said, okay, and leaked this information. Well, this forced the Secatan and, allied tribes, because it was more than just the Secatan, but the Secatan and the allied tribes, they were accelerating their plan, and that really kind of played into what the colonists were trying to do, right? So the colonists leaked this information to force them to, move forward with their plan, so they're a little less organized, right?
Right.
Makes strategic sense. So,
yeah.
Allowed the colonists to intercept the forces, ending with the decapitated head of the Secatan chieftain to be impaled on a spike outside of the Roanoke Colony fort. I mean, kind of extreme, like I said, we're kind of glossing over it a little bit. There was a lot of back and forth that we didn't go over. But essentially, things didn't go well. So with all of this, the colonists were able to make contact with a Sir Francis Drake, who was also exploring the area. Now, this is not directly in response to them, cutting off the head of the chieftain. This is more like, hey, tensions were tight, like things were not going good. We done killed this guy. Things are gonna get worse.
Right.
So, hey, this explorer's coming through. Let's reach out to him. They did. Sir Francis Drake, agreed to leave behind a ship and some supplies to, let the colonists board the ship and they have supplies. They can get back to England. Mm-hmm. Well, a hurricane comes through, washes all that out to sea.
Damn hurricanes.
Yeah, yeah, right. Fortunately, Sir Francis Drake was still there when this happened.
Okay.
So they were able to hitch a ride with him back to England, right?
Okay.
They brought Manteo with them. Manteo, like I said, at this time, he was very pro-English, right?
Right. He was like the middleman, kind of the...
Yeah, even though he was from the area and was picked up with the first expedition,
right,
he seemingly enjoyed being with the English. So much so that he left with them. Well, I mentioned that second wave of supplies, we'd kind of keep up with it, and they wouldn't come back for a while.
Yeah.
A few weeks later, after the colonists all left, the resupply fleet shows up.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. They arrived with about 400 colonists and a year's worth of rations. Colony was abandoned, right? So they're, oh man, that kind of sucks. So they decided, let's leave behind 15 guys. They'll keep watch over the fort, and we'll send another colony later. Kind of.
Right.
Yeah. Really, really strange. And what am I trying to say here? So they left behind these 15 guys, and on their way back, they actually captured a couple Spanish fleets, found a bunch of treasure, and the first colony was actually profitable, oddly enough. Also very relevant for some of the theories that come up later.
Yeah.
But the first expedition, first colony, was profitable, even though it was abandoned.
So that's kind of interesting. So it was actually abandoned twice.
Yeah.
So obviously, we just talked about the first abandonment. They actually left and went back to England.
Yep.
And obviously we don't know what happened to the second one. There are tons of theories on what happened, but nobody actually knows.
Right. So the only real difference between the first colony and the second colony is that the first colony was actually documented. They left with Sir Francis Drake back to England. Mm-hmm. They arrived back in England. So, it's pretty cut and dry what happened with the first one. Difference being with the second one, they weren't necessarily they didn't really... it's hard to say. We don't know if they... Well, obviously, we do know that they abandoned the colony because they weren't there.
Right.
But we'll see and explain a little bit more as we go on. We're about to get into the second colony.
Obviously, like you said, the first one was documented.
Yeah.
I wonder why the second one wasn't.
Oh, because they did.
Or was it and they just haven't found it yet? Like the documentations.
We'll get to it. So, there wasn't much documentation going on unless they were actively exploring something.
Okay.
Again, we'll kind of get into it, but the time period that the second colony was out of contact with England, they were waiting on, basically a resupply.
Right.
Essentially. That got heavily delayed, and, we don't know what happened exactly to them, but whenever that resupply finally came back, they would have found them, but they weren't there.
Okay.
So, assuming if they did document the goings-on of the colony, they would have taken that documentation with them to wherever they went.
Okay.
So, that's why there's no real documentation there.
All right. So at this point, Sir Raleigh is still in London.
Of course.
The Secotan are now actively hostile towards the English.
Should note they're probably hostile towards any Europeans, but the English were really the only ones in the area.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah. The fort is abandoned after a string of misfortunes leading to worst possible scenarios.
Yeah, it was really the perfect storm. Them losing a lot of their rations led to not having as many people, which led to not being as equipped to deal with the natives. Deal with the natives in the colonial term,
Right.
But, very, very, very unfortunate events happening there.
Yes. Also, Manteo is still English allied.
Yes, he did.
Yes.
Go back with them with
he did.
Francis Drake. Again, he becomes relevant when we get to the second colony. So we'll dive on in. So moving into the second colony now.
Okay.
Raleigh was convinced to send another expedition to the area. They knew the area would be hostile, judging off the reports from the first colony coming back. And it was kind of determined that Chesapeake Bay, or modern day Chesapeake Bay, would be the recommended site for the new colony.
Yeah.
Right. Again, not relevant now, super relevant later. So in January 1587, Raleigh approved a charter to found the city of Raleigh. He appointed John White as the governor, and he would have 12 assistants go with him. About 115 people decided it'd be a good idea to go with them. They agreed to join.
Mm-hmm.
And it was mostly middle-class Londoners. The kind of theory at the time was that a lot of these middle-class people, they were well enough off to be able to, afford a journey like this. Because I'm sure they had to fork over some cash for this or whatever.
Right.
Some gold, some shillings. I don't know. But the thought is that they wanted to be landowners. So, they go over there, they own some land, they're good, right? Well, so this group did contain women and children, unlike the first group. Big difference being the first group was 600 men. It was a military force. The second group is colonists. They're not...
Right.
They're just people, laborers and whatnot, artists even. There were a couple artists and archaeologists sort of types with them.
Right.
But yeah, no army, no military force, and Manteo went with them. Okay, so they departed in May and arrived at Croatoan Island in July with way less issues than the first colony had.
Yeah.
The first colony had a very, very hard time here, but second colony got there without a hitch.
Yes.
So, notably, let's see, they departed in May and arrived in July. So obviously didn't run into near as much because the other one took like 4 months. This took 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. The plan was to take a handful of men once they landed on the island. The plan was to take a handful of men, convene with the 15 men that were left behind from the resupply, the second wave resupply from the first colony. Yeah, they left behind 15 guys. Well, they were going to meet with them and then continue on to Chesapeake Bay. Actually, that kind of. So they landed on Croatoan Island. Okay, so they made it to Croatoan Island. Then they went up to Roanoke Island. They were going to convene with the men, just take a short party, small party, meet up with those dudes and pick them up, take them over to Chesapeake Bay.
Okay.
The only problem with that is those 15 guys, something happened to them. It is known that a couple of them, I think 2 of them, were killed, and the other 13 fled. They were never really seen or documented again. Who knows what happened to them? Presumably they were killed. It was a very small group, and the natives were actively hostile towards anyone at the Roanoke fort.
So is this another abandonment?
No, I wouldn't call it an abandonment. It was like they were more than likely killed because they were able to find remains.
Okay.
Right? They were able to find remains. I believe it was even in the fort where a couple of them were killed. Ooh. So,
Okay.
Yeah. So, anyways, another little hitch here. One of the ship captains was like, yeah, we're going to drop all y'all off here on Roanoke. Y'all wanted to go to Chesapeake Bay? Oh, well, y'all are stuck here. So, all the colonists came off. They're like, you know what, we'll just do it. Because, I mean, what else are they going to do? Be thrown into the ocean?
Right.
So, that's kind of a sort of unknown reason as to why. So, all these colonists, they were dropped off on Roanoke. There was already a fort there. It was mostly dismantled and pretty much overgrown. They move in with their supplies and stuff. They had the supplies and whatnot to build a fort, was able to do whatever. They were prepared to build something, but they just had to repurpose the fort that was there. Notably, very shortly after they arrived, one of the colonists was off alone looking for crabs to eat. He was killed.
Oh.
Yep, he was killed by natives. And Manteo kind of steps in and is like, don't do that. And the natives were like,
why not?
Basically. So a little back and forth. Essentially none of this is really documented, but what I imagine happened, Manteo's like, yeah, this isn't a military force. This is actually just people that want to settle down here. Right?
Yeah.
They're gonna, take this fort, whatever. During their discussion, I'm assuming, it was decided that they would relocate about 50 miles, I want to say it was north of where they were. But they were going to relocate a little bit away. Manteo would be greatly honored. Like, the English were like, man, you're the best. Baptized him, because that was the thing. And he was named Lord of Roanoke. So...
fancy.
Yeah. Sort of. On the one hand, the gesture is nice. On the other hand, these people not even from the area are like, yeah, dude, you're the lord of this island.
Yeah.
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 Manteo was not a chieftain or anything of the such, and did not lead any of the people, but declared Lord of Roanoke for the English sake.
Okay.
And so the crew of the fleet, obviously they didn't just bring everybody over and all the boats are staying, all the crew is staying. No, there's actually the crew of the fleet, several of the ships. They were always going to go back to London, or to England.
Right.
It doesn't specify if it was London or not, but they were always going to go back to England.
Yeah.
When they were getting ready to leave, they were having food shortages, right?
Okay.
There was not a lot of food available to them. They were still having trouble with some of the natives, because even though Manteo stepped in and was like, hey, leave these guys alone, that's not going to apply to every single tribe and village that's out there, where it's going to take a little bit of time to spread. Some of the villages may not even want to, agree to that.
Right.
So they're still having some trouble with the natives. They're like, the colonists, they persuade John White, their governor, to go back to England, get food, supplies, maybe even weapons, get some men, come back, build it up, things will be good. White agreed. He departed with the fleet in August of 1587 and would arrive in England in November of 1587. Again, a couple months.
Right.
Yep, 2 to 3 months. As we said before, pretty quick trip.
Yeah.
So, assumedly, he would be back within probably a year, because you got to think 2 to 3
Time
months.
to get stuff together, get food, get people, get other supplies, get it all packed up on the ship, and then probably another 2 to 3 months to get back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as we'll find out, things happened.
They did. So he got back to England, and the Spanish Armada was coming in for an attack. So the Queen actually prohibited any ships from leaving England.
I think the actual decree on that was any capable ships. So, like, anything of any sort of size big enough to deal with, the Spanish Armada, which was pretty formidable at the time. But anyways.
I imagine White would have a ship like that to get back.
Oh, yeah, he would need
to.
He would need something big with plenty of supplies on it, plenty of room for supplies, room for people. It would probably be, a couple ships.
Yeah.
So, but anyways.
So White would actually be permitted to accompany a fleet with a resupply ship to take back to Roanoke in April 1588. On the voyage, the fleet would be attacked and the ship would be looted with all supplies, resulting in White having to go back to England.
Yep. So, worst case happened. They ran into the Spanish Armada.
Yep. But unfortunately, he is not able to do another resupply until 1590.
Yeah. Couple years go by.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense, because, you took this ship out with all these supplies, it got looted. Well, yeah, it probably wasn't a good idea, so I'm not going to let you go again.
Short recap, he leaves Roanoke and the first time in 1587.
Yes, August specifically.
Yes, August 1587. He's not able to leave England to come back until 1590. So we're looking at 3 years compared to what was originally thought as to be around a year.
Yeah, it was pretty much exactly 3 years, because as you'll read in our next little section here, he made it back in August of 1590.
Oh, fun. So in August of 1590, he would arrive on the north side of Croatoan Island. Few days later, crew would see smoke coming from Roanoke Island.
Yep.
The next day, the crew would see smoke coming from South Croatoan Island, but when they investigated, they found nothing.
Yep.
As they were making their way to Roanoke, they spotted a fire, but by the time they made it there, it was night and deemed safer to stay on the ship.
Yeah, so obviously we weren't around in this time period.
Right.
But there was a lot of weird things that happened in this little part. So they arrive, they're there for a couple days. During this time, John White doesn't make any attempt to contact the natives of Croatoan Island, the Croatoans. He doesn't make any attempt to contact them. They like you said, they see smoke. It's on a whole nother island, so it's not going to be worth it for them to go investigate it immediately because they're not going to make it there on time.
Right.
So then they see smoke on the island they're at. They're able to actually go investigate it. Don't find anything.
Right.
And they're like, okay, let's just move on to Roanoke. Spot a fire. By the time they get there, it's night, and they should probably stay on the ship. That part I can agree with.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that too.
You're going into an area that at a time pretty recently the natives were not happy with you being there.
Yes.
So it's probably best to not go out at night.
Yeah. Right.
But anyways, more stuff happens.
On the morning of August 18th, they found fresh tracks in the sand, but there was no other sign of contact.
Notably, that's the day after the previous thing, where they saw the fire and stayed on the ship. Okay, August 18th was the day after.
Yeah, okay. So while they're headed to find the colony, they came across CRO carved into a tree. As they got closer to the fort, they found the fort had been fortified with palisade, which is a fence of stakes.
Yeah.
Closer to the entrance, carved into the stakes, was Croatoan.
Yep.
The colony was found abandoned. Houses were dismantled, and anything that could be carried had been removed from the site. There were no signs of struggle or any sort of attack. There were no graves and no human remains. The resupply party ended up turning into a search party. They went back to the ship and made plans to look for Croatoan Island the next day.
Yeah. So they get there. They find CRO on a tree. That's pretty much assumed that they just ran out of space carving it on a tree.
Right.
And then decided to just carve it on the front of the fort because they're not going to be there anymore.
Right.
Yeah. So, they said before, whenever we first read it, kind of ominous, but at the same time, it's literally just the name of the island directly south of them.
Right. Unfortunately, the cable holding one of their anchors snapped, which left them with only one anchor, which is apparently not enough to properly secure a ship. The crew intended on staying in the Caribbean and returning in spring of 1591 to conclude the search. But a storm first forced them to return to England in October of 1590.
Yeah, so pretty shortly after there was a storm and they saw it best to return to England.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the story of what happened with Roanoke. John White doesn't really do much else after that. It's assumed that the colony is gone.
Yes.
I mean, it's been 3 years. Who knows what happened? They left a note saying Croatoan, which it is worth noting here that they did have plans with John White. They made plans before he left that if they were to have to relocate, that they would leave some sort of message for him. Okay. And if they were forced out, if they, were relocating not willingly, they had a specific sign that they would leave, which was a cross of some sort. It wasn't like it was not like a Christian cross. It was, I forget what it's called.
Okay.
But it was a symbol, and that symbol was found nowhere. And it's assumed that if they were able to carve Croatoan into the front of the palisade, that they would have also had time to carve whatever symbol it was. It's also assumed that they would probably carve that symbol first, because that might be the only thing they get to carve.
Right. From what I read too, the little bit that I was able to read this week, they never came back. Like, they went back to England because they obviously couldn't anchor the ship properly. But from what I could read, they never came back to finish the search.
Yeah, so kind of. Things happened. There were investigations into what happened. Okay. A couple, not really anything too major, because like I said, it was pretty well assumed that they moved to the Croatoan Island and just assimilated with the tribes there.
Right.
Because I believe they were pretty friendly with the Croatoans. So it's just assumed that they assimilated. And John White, he was pretty much the only one from the colony that left. He did come back with others, but they weren't really invested. So John White and Walter Raleigh were really the only ones that kind of even remotely cared about.
So when John White left, I'm assuming he was alone. So he sailed for 2 months across the Atlantic Ocean.
No, he left with the crew of the fleet that brought them there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. None of the other colonists left with him, though.
Okay.
So of the colonists, he was the only one that left.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So what happened to him?
Right.
Yeah. That's.
Of course, there are several theories.
Oh yeah. We'll get into theories, but let's need a little bit more information. We'll talk a little bit about the investigations into it.
Okay.
So these investigations, they had varying success, varying effort even. First of which was Sir Walter Raleigh. For the first time, he was able to go over and look. This was his first time ever being able to leave London for, the sake of going to his colony.
Okay.
Right? But it's a little shady and honestly kind of comedic in a way.
Yeah.
But he made his first voyage in 1595. He claimed that he was searching for his colonists, but later on he admitted that he was actually searching for El Dorado. Yeah.
So he pretty much said, forget them, I'm going after the gold.
Yeah, he did sail by the region though. But he claimed...
Hey, y'all!
Right. He claimed that the weather wasn't suitable to land.
Okay.
Yep. But that wouldn't be his only journey. In 1602, he would resume the search. Actually, though, his goal was to harvest sassafras, which is native to the area. Mm-hmm. And at the time, in 1602, sassafras prices were skyrocketing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, pretty convenient. Let me go look for my lost colony. Oh, I came back with tons of sassafras? Don't mind me.
Hey, look what I found. Not the people you sent me after.
Right. So, after that was pretty much all that he did. I believe he passed away very shortly after. Mm-hmm. We'll get into conspiracies a little later, but there is a pretty notable conspiracy involving that. But anyways.
Okay.
So, a little bit after this, after the establishment of Jamestown, right? I'm sure y'all know about Jamestown. It was a pretty big settlement, right?
Yeah.
If you don't know, the easiest way I can put it, it's the settlement that Pocahontas is based off of.
Okay.
Yeah. But Pocahontas isn't really historically accurate, but,
right.
It kind of gets the point across. So, after the establishment of Jamestown, John Smith, one of the big dudes there, he was captured by the Powhatan natives. Anyways, he was captured, and while he was in their clutches, he was told about 2 villages that were supposedly inhabited by people wearing European-style clothing, and some of the structures in those villages were of European style as well.
Okay.
Nothing ever really came of that, though. He made plans for a large-scale exploration of the area, but there was a dispute with the natives, and they did not carry through those plans. A couple smaller search parties were sent out in the general direction that he was told those civilizations would be. Nothing was ever found. Yep. Then a little bit later, in 1609, it was alleged that the colonists had been massacred. There was no evidence of a source for this. It is thought that maybe there was a letter from John Smith, but there was actually never a letter confirmed. There were travels back and forth from the region in England at this time, but there was no evidence that they were massacred. Then in 1610, William Strachey suggested that the colonists were peaceful with the tribe in the area. but were then attacked unprovoked. It came from a book that he had written that was never published. The book was forgotten, then recovered in 1849. So, little thing there, make of it what you will. I mean, it makes sense, you know, from a logical standpoint, but it's also in the time where these colonists are going back to England and making claims that, hey, the natives over there are savages.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, like, take it with a grain of salt, essentially.
Right.
But that wouldn't be the only little thing. In 1701, so about 100 years later,
right,
John Lawson, a historian, explored the area and found evidence of the influence of English culture supporting the idea that the colonists integrated into the native communities of the area. So, again, it could be like any of the English settlements by this point. By 1701, there could have been multiple Englishmen that branched off from whatever colonies they were part of, ran off to be with the natives. Like, that was a thing that happened.
Yeah.
So, you know, it supports the idea that that's a possibility, but it could be a number of different things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even more research was done later. If you want to take those, tell us about them. Not too much going on.
Okay.
But a little bit of research was done after the 1701.
So there was research of preservations of the area in the 1930s.
Yeah.
Archaeological research was done in the 1990s, but couldn't be conclusively linked to the 1587 colony. A lot of the artifacts found could just as easily have been from the 1585 colony, or even from a European trading post of the same era. No living descendants have ever been confirmed, and no remains have ever been found to be from the 1587 colony either.
Yeah. So, big distinction there, specifically the 1587 colony. Mm-hmm. They have found artifacts, they have found remains, but it can't really be concluded that said remains or artifacts are from specifically the 1587 colony.
Right.
On the living descendants, it is important to note the word confirmed. There have been several tribes of the area have come forward and said that they are descendants of the lost colony. Never been confirmed because there's never been any remains found of the lost colony, so there's no DNA available.
Yeah, there's no DNA proof that they were...
Right. So, yeah, you know, it's kind of one of those things. It makes this a sort of lost to time mystery. Like, we're so far away from that point in time. There wasn't forensics at that time. There wasn't DNA. Well, I mean, there was DNA, but people didn't know about DNA at the time. They couldn't...
Because, I mean, we're looking at a little over, 400 years?
Yeah, I mean, close to 500.
Happened. Yeah.
Yeah, a very long time ago.
Yep.
But, yeah, so there was no DNA testing or anything done back then, obviously.
Well, right.
So remains would have had to have been found more recently for us to do DNA testing to confirm that this is this person. And then even then, we'd have to be able to match it to some sort of record of back then.
Right.
You know, you don't just look at, a strand of DNA and it has your name on it, right?
Right.
So, it's kind of hard to tell.
Right.
Because of, what was around then versus what is around today. But that is a good thing to lead us into our theories and conspiracies.
Ooh, fun.
These are fun. We've got some good ones. Some of the first ones that we're going to talk about are actually a decent bit more compelling than some of the later ones, but they all have bits of fact as to why they're even partially relevant. So if you want to get us started on them.
All right. So the first theory we're going to talk about is the colonists migrated to Chesapeake Bay leaving behind a small group to wait for White's return. The migrants stayed with the Chesapeakeans, and the ones that were left behind stayed with the Croatoans.
Yep. So that one's that one's interesting, and I kind of like that one because Chesapeake Bay was where they were supposed to go.
Right.
It makes sense that the colonists would go there because tensions probably were high in
Right.
Roanoke, so it would make sense for them to leave to try to make that journey up there. This assumes that they succeeded in their journey.
Right.
There was, I didn't mention it before, but while I was reading, I did see something about a potential theory that this happened. You know, they merged with the Chesapeakeans and were caught up with an unrelated battle. Like a different tribe had it out for the Chesapeakeans, and the English were just caught in the crossfire. The colonists from Roanoke were just... They were there, so the enemy tribe killed them too.
Okay.
So, makes sense as to why there would be no remains found, no descendants found. You know, they went to a whole different area and were killed.
Okay.
I kind of like that theory. Makes a lot of sense. The second theory is just a more simplistic version of that, stating that the colonists just assimilated with any of the numerous tribes around them.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't even have to be all of them, you know, merging with a singular. It could have, you know, the group could have split off into a couple, you know, like 4 groups of 25 colonists went to 4 different tribes. You know, that's it spreads them out even more and make it even harder to really hammer it down. Third theory, a little more interesting, a little different. This third theory states that the colonists attempted and failed to sail back to England using ships that were left behind. There were, in fact, ships that were left behind that were not there whenever John White returned. And it's assuming that if, you know, the colony did go back to Croatoan, they used those ships to do so, because we are on 2 different islands here. But anyways, this would have required some of the colonists to be left behind, since they wouldn't have enough room on the ship nor enough rations to make the journey with everyone. So that kind of discredits it a little bit, or, you know, even strengthens it, because, you know, let's say out of the 115 people, they were able to fit 70. Well, 70 is a little more than half. Let's say they were able to fit 60, roughly half. Those 60 people set out to sea.
Yeah.
They fail. You never find them. Then it's
Which would make sense because, you know, then at that point they'd be lost at sea.
Right. And you're not gonna find them.
Nah.
You're not gonna find them.
Nah.
But you have the 60 that leaves behind, you know, again, roughly 60 that stay.
Yeah.
That's a much smaller group, much more plausible for them to just be entirely, you know, lost or assimilated into
other
the native society down there. But that one's cool. That one's decent.
Yeah.
There's the only problem with it is there's not really anything to support that other than the ship being missing. But that could also be blamed on, you know, 3 years. That's 3 hurricane seasons.
Yeah.
So
a hurricane could have easily taken that out.
Yeah. Or any sort of large storm. Like, realistically, like any large storm
especially back in those days.
Yeah, it could have swept that ship out to sea. Not even necessarily destroyed it, just, you know, maybe snapped the cable on the anchor.
Yeah.
Calling back to what happened to John White, you know, snap off the anchor, and the boat's not going to stay.
Right.
So.
Right.
But yeah, take this next one. This next one's very interesting.
So the next one is a conspiracy against Raleigh. The colonists that were intentionally marooned at Roanoke because Sir Francis Walsingham wanted to undermine Raleigh for political reasons, which was also discredited due to Walsingham funding Raleigh's expeditions.
Yeah, so it was, you know, it was a thing at the time. We kind of talked about it. The group, the second colony group, they were intended to go to Chesapeake. They didn't. Whenever they got to Roanoke, the ship captain, one of the ship captains, was like, "Nope, y'all stay in here." So it's thought that Sir Walsingham had something to do with it. but it's not really. There's no proof. There's more disproof for it,
Right.
because, as stated, Walsingham funded Raleigh's expeditions.
Right.
Like, he helped him out with money to, actually go there.
Right.
So why would he,
Yeah.
why would he do that?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
There's also thoughts that, to go along with this, there's also thoughts that Raleigh intentionally, like, instead of it being a conspiracy against Raleigh, Raleigh was the one that said, yeah, leave him on Roanoke and let him die. Basically, the thought was insurance money. Because
Okay.
the thought was insurance money because the first expedition wasn't profitable. But if y'all remember, in the first expedition on the way back, they captured those Spanish ships, got the treasure, and the first expedition was profitable.
Right.
So, it doesn't really hold water there.
Yeah.
But the next one is actually a really good one also.
Okay.
But it's a little far-fetched, but you'll see what we're talking about. So, this theory is called Beachland. Theory is that the colony was never lost. That their goal was their goal from the start was to actually harvest sassafras, and their loss of contact was fabricated to throw off the Spanish. Raleigh's 1595 and 1602 voyages were just to pick up the harvested sassafras. Now, this is supported by small coffins with Christian markings being found around the Alligator River, and a map showing sassafras trees in the area. So it was known at the time that the Alligator River was, a pretty good place to harvest sassafras.
Okay.
And they found some, coffins with Christian markings. But the big thing that isn't in its favor is that sassafras prices wouldn't begin to go up until 10 years after the second colony was founded. So
Yeah.
Raleigh would have had to be able to predict the future, because it was the late 1590s that those prices would start going up. Or at least, like 1600, 1601 would have been, the time that he would send them over there, if that was his goal. But no, they were sent in 1587, so
Yeah.
doesn't make a whole lot of sense for him to do that. But I do like it.
Yeah,
it.
I like it too.
It does make a lot of sense outside of that one point that actually just blows a hole in it entirely.
The next one is a theory about a Spanish attack. The Spanish knew of the colony and would have been in their best interest to eliminate it. This was discredited due to the fact that the Spanish were searching for the colony as late as 1600, implying that they were also unaware of their fate.
Yep. So basically, it would have been in their best interest to wipe the colony out.
That's interesting. So the Spanish... So were the Spanish, actually looking for them, or is this just a theory?
No, the Spanish the Spanish were actually looking for them.
Okay.
But the theory is that the Spanish found them, attacked them. Theory makes sense because the Spanish want the area, so they're gonna contest any other European nations there.
Yeah.
But the Spanish they have records of still searching for the colony as late as 1600, which again, years after the colony went missing. So if they would have found them and eliminated them or caused them to move, they would have had note of it, and they probably wouldn't still be looking for them 13 years after they disappeared.
Right. There also would have been found as signs of attacks.
Yeah, that too.
And there were no signs of attacks.
Yeah. But the next theory, a little bland, but kind of neat. This one is the Cora tree. There is another tree in the area with Cora carved into it. C-O-R-A. So that could mean a lot of things.
Okay.
In terms of this theory, it could be a sign that the colonists left Croton Island and attempted to settle with the Coronine tribe on the mainland.
Okay.
The only problem with that is it could also just be someone much later carving the name of their sweetheart into it. Reason why we can't tell? Because of lightning and decay, it is impossible to count the growth rings on the tree.
Oh.
Yep. The tree has decayed so much that they can't even tell how old it is. So, can't really do anything with that.
Damn.
Yep. So, again, it's one of those things. It could definitely point to something, but it could just as easily point to something else unrelated.
Right.
It's kind of the theme with this. A lot of stuff can just be attributed to anything else because, like I said, lost to time. This is very old.
Right. So the next one is Dare Stones. It's a series of stones with inscriptions that were found in the southeastern U.S. The inscriptions were from Eleanor Dare to her father, John White, telling of the fate of the colony. It states that the colony migrated from Roanoke to outside of modern-day Atlanta, Georgia. The first was found in 1937. Then 47 more were presented in response to a reward offered. The 47 stones were all of a different style, and all traced back to a stonecutter in Georgia, therefore discrediting them. Although the original stone has not been proven or disproven.
Yeah, this one's kind of cool. So, what happened there was a stone found. I believe it said something about they left, they ran into trouble. A lot of them died and were buried in a mass grave. The mass grave has never been found, but the stone was found a good ways away. The person who found it has just been wishy-washy on where he found it at, though.
Right.
Again, this was in 1937, so I don't think the person is still around for us to drive to his house and question him. But
right.
From what I read, he was not really able to pinpoint exactly where he found it, so they weren't really able to find more. And then 47 more. So they find this one. They say, "Hey, we'll give you money if you come up with any more." And this stonecutter in Georgia is like, "I got you."
Right. Boom, here's a whole box.
He makes 47 of these with different inscriptions, and they're all not real. But that caused a lot of disinterest in the stones, in the original stone, that nobody really went back and looked at them because they're like, "Oh man, it was a bunch of fakes." But the first one, again, like different style, could have been real, but we don't really know.
So did anyone actually, has anyone ever looked further into the stone?
I'm sure some people have, but nothing conclusive. Yeah. That one's interesting.
So is it written where you can decipher it? Or okay.
Yeah, they were actually able to read the first stone, but they don't know for sure if there's more or if that was the only one. It refers to, a mass grave. Like I said, they haven't found the mass grave because they don't really know where the first stone was found. And they don't know that that's where it originated from. It could have been from somewhere else, picked up by a bird or something. I don't know how that stuff works. Could have been picked up by something else and moved to a different area.
That's true.
Yeah, so that one's cool and I think could provide more insight.
Yeah.
However, it's another one of those things. It's so hard to prove or disprove that the original stone was real.
Right.
From actually Eleanor Dare, actually to John White, and not just made later by someone,
that decided to make 47 of them to make some money.
Right. Could have just as easily been someone made one of them.
Yeah, to try to throw some people off.
Yeah, or, get a little fame off of it.
Right.
The guy that found it even. His name is on Wikipedia.
Okay.
So, the guy could have just been doing it for attention.
Yeah.
Our last theory, as I said before, was one of my favorite ones.
Okay.
Aliens. The theory is that aliens abducted them, and that's it. There's no proof, but try your hardest to disprove it, and I guarantee that you can't.
Right.
So, therefore, it is the fact. It cannot be disproven. That's how it works, right?
Yeah.
If you can't disprove it, it's true.
Kind of interesting, though, to, Like, think about it. So, like, aliens come down, suck them up into the spaceship, wherever they do that. So they also took all the houses and the buildings that were dismantled, too?
Yeah, sure, why not? One of them also came down and carved Croatoan into the palisade. Yeah, prove me wrong. You can't.
What if, hear me out,
Okay.
let's say they weren't doing good
Okay.
in the area. They needed to move for whatever reason.
Okay.
They decide they're going to go to Croatoan Island. So they
Okay.
leave John White the note.
Right.
Then the aliens come. And then boom, they're just gone. Poof.
So, what you're saying is, we can combine all of these.
Yeah.
We can combine all of the theories. All right, let's see what we got here. So, the ultimate theory as to what happened. Here's what we got. All right. So.
Okay, so they decide so the original plan
Yeah.
was to go to Chesapeake Bay,
Right.
right? Okay. So they decide, all right, we're going to head there, but, let's stop at the Croatoan Island first.
Right. Right.
So they get there, half go to, or try to make it to Chesapeake Bay.
Mm-hmm.
The other half stays in Croatoan.
Uh-huh.
Meanwhile, but obviously before they leave Roanoke, they're going to write the note that says Croatoan, because that's where they're going to stop first.
Yeah, yeah.
Because assuming at that point, they're like, I don't know when White's coming back.
Yeah.
Might be soon. Might be later.
Mm-hmm.
Let's leave him a note. So they leave him the note, and they go on to Croatoan Island first.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming that John White makes it back before they make it to Chesapeake Bay.
Okay.
Okay? So then they split up, so they have half there in Croatoan in case John White comes back. Then the other half goes to Chesapeake Bay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first part.
Okay.
What else do we have to...
All right. So let's go with it here. So you have your thing. Half of them go to Chesapeake Bay. Mm-hmm. Half of them go to Croatoan. Right.
Right.
So the ones that go to Croatoan, half of those try to go back to England. Because it makes sense. 25 of them on the ship. Not that, or 30 of them. 60 is half, roughly.
Right.
So 30 of them on a ship. Not that bad on supplies. They can leave. They're good.
So they're leaving from Croatoan Island.
Shipwrecks. They're lost at sea. Whatever. They don't make it. You can't find them.
Right.
Right. Then all of this was a conspiracy. Sir Francis Walsingham was like, you know what? I've been giving Raleigh all this money. I'm gonna do him dirty.
Right.
We're gonna leave him on Roanoke. So he was the reason they were on Roanoke in the first place. That they had to split off. Half go to Chesapeake, half go to Croatoan.
Okay.
Right. But when John White left,
right.
All right, you following me?
Yeah.
So when John White left, he sent notice to Raleigh that instead of harvesting the sassafras where he intended, they would be harvesting it at Alligator River.
Okay.
Right? So the half that went, the 30 that went to Croatoan Island, left Croatoan Island. I don't know where Alligator River is. Yeah, let's just discredit that one, because I don't think the Beachland one is that good, because, it would...
Kind of doesn't fit.
It would involve Raleigh having incredible foresight.
Okay.
So we're just going to cut that one out.
Okay, so...
The Spanish attacked them.
Yes.
The Spanish attacked the... I got it. The Spanish attacked the 30 that left on the ship. That's why they were still looking for the colony up until 1600. I mean, that doesn't do anything as to why they left. But anyways, it doesn't matter. The Cora tree...
And they continued looking because they were looking for everybody else.
Yeah, the Cora tree, right? Cora tree, the ones that were on Croatoan Island decided, I don't like this. Let's go to the mainland.
Okay.
So the 30 go to the mainland, write Cora on a tree because they're still convinced that John White's going to come for them.
Right.
Notice that the ones that went to Chesapeake Bay did not leave any note, right? ones went to Croatoan did. So they're the same ones that still believe John White's coming.
Mm-hmm.
So they go to the mainland, to the Coronine people, so they leave Cora on a tree.
Mm-hmm.
Right? On their way there, Eleanor Dare is one of the 30, because, it's her dad, so
exactly.
She's expecting him to come back, so she travels with them.
Yes.
Leaves behind the stone, maybe some more, we don't really know. Only one was found. And then, once they get there, the aliens come. Right? So they just go across the area and pick up all the Europeans.
Oh my god.
So it is the aliens. The aliens took all of them ultimately.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like the theory.
Yeah. That was fun.
Well, that does it for this episode.
It does.
Yeah. A lot of stuff happening with Roanoke, but hey, we deciphered it. Who knows what really happened? Realistically, I actually do think that they just assimilated with the tribes around in some way, shape, or form. Whether or not they went to Chesapeake or not, there's no evidence supporting it other than that being their
whether they
original
went anywhere.
Plan. But I think they probably went to Croatoan and assimilated with those tribes, and what happened to them from there, who knows? It's hard to tell because natives of the time didn't of that area at least didn't really keep much in the way of records. So, but yeah, that's it. Make sure y'all like and subscribe. Check us out on Patreon. All the links down below.
Check out our Etsy store as well. We've got t-shirts and stuff with designs from the videos.
We need a design for this one.
Ooh.
Yeah, check us out on social media. Leave comments and all that. But what's your design? What do you got for this?
I don't know.
All right, I got one.
You do?
Yeah. So,
what's up?
Wasn't mentioned, so it's a little nugget for those of you who've stuck around this long. But it wasn't mentioned, but there was actually a map found with a indication of a fort in an area around here. The map was made by John White.
Oh.
And there's a patch on the map covering up that fort symbol. And typically they would use patches for corrections or for damage.
Right.
Well, it had this patch on it. Nobody knew what was underneath it for the longest time. Then it was examined, and there was notation that it could have been a fort. So, I'm thinking a map, right?
Okay.
With the fort marked on it. And a flying saucer.
Flying over the fort?
Ooh, I got a better one. Interior of a flying saucer with...
looking down at the map?
Yeah, like a hologram of the map.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah.
Okay.
I like that one.
We can do something with that.
Yeah. Finished design is right here. Check out the Etsy store. Get it on a shirt. Get it on...
a cup.
Whatever we have on there. Get it on whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever we have for
whatever's
sale.
available.
Yep. I don't know what's going to be available. Probably a t-shirt at the very least, but maybe a phone case too. Who knows?
It's gonna be cool.
It's gonna be a cool design. Make sure to check it out. But that's it. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye, y'all.